All right, let's be frank. Tuition increases have been occurring since the 1990s, and ever since then, student government has been fighting against those same increases. And it hasn't worked so far. Those increases have continued to get larger and to get even more disproportionate for in-state out students every year. So we really need to start looking at this intelligently, looking at this and these arguments we can make to ask for lower increases, to ask we not even see tuition increase in a way that makes sense, that is something the Board of Trustees can really listen to and relate to, because ultimately we come from different sides of it. What they're looking at is a business model, and what students are looking at is what basically decides whether or not we can come here. So we really have to start making the argument and really identifying where tuition hurts, why it hurts, and why it shouldn't be increased as much as it has been. And what this really comes down to is looking for which students are directly impacted. And the way it looks to me, and from talking with Shirley Ort and from talking to other experts in this area, there's three groups of students. There are those students who are in such financial need that the university will cover them, will meet their financial need as tuition increases. And so ultimately, they won't feel the impact of that tuition increase as much as they would without that university support. And then there's another third of students. These are the students who are so well off that their parents basically can absorb this increase, and they're not going to be impacted by it either. These are the students whose parents make above $500,000 a year who, believe it or not, can actually absorb these incredible increases. But there is another third of students who don't fit in either category, who are going to feel any tuition increase and are going to feel it in the way that stings the most. And these are the middle students, the students who are not in such financial need that they will be covered by the university, but who at the same time aren't so well off that they don't feel it. And what I think is really encouraging is that the Board of Trustees has recently begun to look at this group of students, and I think that we can really push in this area to say this is how it impacts and this is who it impacts, and these students are equally important. It's equally important that these students be here at Carolina, and we need to do something for them. And there's really only three ways, once you start looking at that middle third of students, to address those needs. One way would be through grants. It would be through giving them extra financial assistance, which I don't think, if you look at it as a systematic problem, is going to be successful. And I think ultimately the Board of Trustees will have to admit that grant programs aren't going to be successful. Another way is through variable tuition rates. And this was something that was first introduced about 20 years ago, and it's only recently with the technology that this is even a possibility, but it's still a pretty far out one. And the third possibility is the one that I think we can all agree makes the most sense and is ultimately the one that's going to be the most feasible. And that is not to increase tuition the way we've been seeing it increased. But it's only when we've made that argument, when we've been able to identify that these are the students who get hurt, that we can really say this is why you shouldn't increase tuition. Because in the last tuition debate and the tuition debate before that, the Board of Trustees, when we asked them not to increase tuition, said, well, who does it hurt? And we had to say that financially needy students were being covered and it wasn't hurting them. But we also now have to say that even though we are protecting those students who have the most need, that there's still other students who have need, and it's those students that we need to look out for now, and it's ultimately those students who cannot be protected any other way except by avoiding further tuition increases. And so ultimately, my strategy for this is not only to identify those students, but to also point out exactly what tuition is going to. Because when you're looking at tuition through a business model, raising more money makes sense. That's just how business works. But Carolina's not a business, we're a university. And so when we raise money, we need to look at where it goes. And ultimately, I believe that if you're raising money from students, that money needs to go to students. And you need to let students see that. You can't ask me to pay for something without letting me see a receipt, letting me know what my money is going towards. And so I'm going to go to the Board of Trustees and ask them to really itemize where this tuition money is going, to let us see, is it going to fund more professors, or are you just putting it away for future years? Because this year, our chancellor said that we didn't need more tuition increases to cover faculty, and yet they still increased. So we really need to know where that money is going towards. And we also need to make sure that that money is going towards students. Don't use student money to fund research that can pay for itself through grants. Use student money to pay for research that's going to include students. Or use student money to pay for faculty who are going to spend extra time engaging with students in the classroom. But use money that's from students for students, and that's essential. And the other thing is I want to make sure that students know about those resources they are paying for. So it's not just my money goes somewhere and it disappears. I also want to make sure that we can publicize those resources, like the Writing Center, like tutoring, that student money goes towards, that student fees pay for, so that if you are paying money to Carolina, you know what you're getting out of it and you have the chance to use those resources. And we're going to do that both through an amazing ad campaign that my girls have been working on, and also through a Carolina Wiki, using technology to really make sure that students know about these services. And I think ultimately, when we present such a very professional and a very concise view of why tuition hurts, of why it needs to be kept low, that the Board of Trustees will have to listen. Or they'll have to make a very good case of why not. And I think that once the information is made available to students, once we can see where that money is going, and once we can see who's really feeling those tuition increases, then the answer is the tuition can't continue to increase the way it has been.